you need no introduction. Pastor Hall and Gloria Stickley, I think, did everyone see the great article in the paper there, front page?
Yeah.
Front page news, that's hot stuff right there. Okay, but I know they spent a little bit of time working on this book, and it kind of came to fruition, but it is an awesome book. If you get a chance, I'm just going to share some slides from it here today, but it's a great book. I think you'll really enjoy the program they have here today. You're going to find her very passionate about this. I'm going to be in the back kind of telling Pastor Hall, you got to cut a little short because he gets into it, which is great. Okay, but I said, try to keep 45 minutes to an hour so that we have time to enjoy our snacks and again purchase the book. I know they'll be happy to sign them as well. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Gloria Stickley and Pastor Hall. So let's. I'm gonna go in the back. Okay. I'm gonna move my stuff out. He said he doesn't need a microphone. Probably gonna start preaching, but that's all right.
Well, I heard part of my presentation.
That's the reason I'm still here.
Okay. I wish I had one of these in the pulpit.
You can help someone falls asleep just that with that laser.
Like that. Where'd Gloria go?
She's hiding here in the corner.
Aren't you going to start this? Didn't you want to start this?
This is her first rodeo,
Just
so.
say, if everyone can hear me, thank you for coming. And I know you read the article in the paper, but I do want to tell you one thing. In December, Tim came to us and said he wanted to schedule a program where we could present a story about the book. I said, Tim, we don't even have the book. And he said, you'll get it soon. We have the copyright date in the book as 2019. It came out just a couple of weeks ago. So you had a lot of faith in us.
Always, always.
And so I do hope you enjoy the program. That's all.
And that's all you're going to say?
Everything else is in the book.
Wow. Well, let me first say a few words just to thank you. I've been a member of the group here now for a couple of years. I've enjoyed the presentations. I like to hear about history, and so I appreciate the invitation to come and be with you today. Tim is going to go like this if I get too long. When we were interviewed for the article in the NVD, they asked us, Gloria and myself, why did you do this? And I didn't get to say it, but one of the reasons I felt very passionate about this is to bring history to life, okay? And I think that's reading history, studying history, researching history, sharing history, brings it to life for us. I didn't know some of these pastors before I started researching them. The old Pastor Schwartz came to life for me when I read his diary. Okay? I really, as a pastor of the church, the Bible's a history book, right? We believe it's the living Word of God. And it isn't the living Word of God if it's throwing dust on your coffee table in the living room. There, I'm going to preach.
So you're going to preach it.
Cut that. Again, thank you all for having me here today, and Gloria as well. Let me get the clip. That is a drone shot of the church. Gloria, who was the drone operator?
Jonathan Pearson.
Jonathan
They were
Pearson.
Sandy Hook.
Made several drone shots of the church, front, back, side. We chose this one. Gives an interesting perspective of this church, the main part of which was built in 1844. And I'll give you a little more history as we get into this. Dedication. It's dedicated to the glory of God, the ministers and congregations of St. Paul, past, present, and future. This all started or began as a project for our bicentennial celebration. That's 250 years, if you're counting. Back in 1997. We had hoped to have this book then, so we're a little late. But that's really when it started. John Horan did a lot of research looking at minutes from the congregation, from our synod, which is the next larger body, and then even beyond that. But that kind of didn't happen. Gloria and I picked up the ball about 8 years ago. My earliest email to Gloria was about then, trying to get this whole project going again. This congregation started with a land grant. We certainly want to thank Nick, and I don't see Nick Gracie here today. A copy, this is the Lord Fairfax grant, 200 acres to the German settlement here on the North Fork of the Shenandoah. 1771, you probably can't see it there, but that's when it was given. And Nick found the original, which we've had preserved and framed, and it's in the Handley Library Archives. We're kind of protected of that. But the whole thing begins about then, really before then, as far as church records are concerned, in 1747 with the first baptisms. Back then, the Germans came into the colonies in several places. The main port was Philadelphia, up the Delaware Bay into Philadelphia. Again, that's where I was raised, so I know a little more of the history of the German area there in Philadelphia area. But it really began with a lot of turmoil in Europe in the late 1600s, 1700s. Wars, famines, the land was devastated, which allowed these people, Queen Anne was generous in trying to get her colony populated, even sending recruiters into Europe. And these Germans left the Alsace in whole communities because their community there was gone. Most of them came into Philadelphia, German. But they also, about the same time, came into Virginia at Germanna. Okay, my first congregation was the Hebron congregation in Madison, 1717. They also came into New York in New Bern. They came into North Carolina in Newburgh. They came into South Carolina in Charleston and Savannah. They didn't bring any pastors. And that was a problem. We had very few pastors in that whole area that I just mentioned, from New York to Savannah. Salzburgers settled on the Savannah River at a place called Rincon, New Jerusalem church there. And they did have a pastor, but they were kind of isolated in Georgia at this time. I'm getting ahead of myself. I better go to the German colonists needed some pastors. Henry Melchior Muhlenberg, whose picture is up here now, was the father of American Lutheranism. Not the first pastor here, but he was called to 3 small congregations outside of Philadelphia, west of Philadelphia. He was educated at the Halle School in Germany, originally an orphanage. He wanted to go to India, but Franke, who was the head of the school, said, no, we want you to go to the North American colonies. Henry Melchior left the Alsace, and it's hard kind of to grasp the commitment these people needed to get here. I've read his diaries and the diaries of his sons, I'll mention them a little bit. Peter Muhlenberg in Woodstock was the oldest of his sons. But Henry, after he got the call, these 3 congregations in Pennsylvania left the Alsace area, Halle, down the Neckar River into the Rhine, down the Rhine in a barge, down the Rhine to Rotterdam. Rotterdam was on the coast of the English Channel, and you got in a larger ship there to get across to London. There was a German colony in London called St. Mary's in the Strand. There they had to, again, wait, get jobs, order enough money, resources to get a ship's captain to get a boat across the Atlantic. Okay? Henry made that journey. He left over there, I can give you the exact dates, but it took him over 3 months. And he was headed to Philadelphia. Back then, ships didn't go, where they were supposed to. The winds didn't cooperate. There were wars going on, ships out in the Atlantic shooting. And he ended up in Charleston Harbor, Charleston, South Carolina. What did he do there? That was 3 months. 3 months and 15 days, something like that, I think. When he got there, he was requested to visit the Salzburgers up on the Savannah. Charleston is close to Savannah. He got there late, and there were no more ships, so he couldn't get to Philadelphia. Okay, the ships quit sailing in the wintertime between Charleston and Philadelphia. So he got overland to Savannah and stayed the winter in Savannah at the Salzburger community in New Jerusalem. My classmate, roommate, his first call was to Jerusalem in Ringa, Georgia. When I went to Hebron, the oldest congregation here in Virginia. Interesting. So we've kept up with each other on the history of these churches. Another early pastor, and I'll get back to Henry Melchior and his connection to this congregation, but the first resident pastor, he was not ordained, was Simon Haar. He was a schoolmaster. Started the first German school in Strasbourg and attracted all of the Germans in this whole area. There were 28 German Lutheran communities in Strasbourg County, in Shenandoah County, excuse me. Strasbourg being the center of that. Simon Haar, again, got into the country through Philadelphia. Okay. Interesting about Simon, he married a gal. All of these early pastors married a couple different times because the women died in childbirth. Okay, almost all of them did. Our first resident ordained pastor, Christian Strait, and he'll come up next, married 3 times and had about 20 kids. He kept marrying 20-year-olds.
Praise the Lord, I guess.
I think that's an interesting dynamic. Marry a gal, 20 years old, had 7 kids. She dies in childbirth. He marries another 20-year-old. He had 11 kids. Okay, you get the picture. Okay. Simon Haar married, as soon as he got to Philadelphia, married a gal in Pennsylvania. She died. Okay. And he was rather well-to-do. But Henry Melchior, the slide before this, he met up with him and sent him to Virginia. Wilderness then. Just wilderness. But there were German communities all the way down the Shenandoah. So Simon agreed to do this. I have one record that he went the whole way to Wythe County. An interesting thing that I still need to explore a little bit, but then he came back to this area. Simon married again when he got here, okay, and started the school, was here from the late 50s, 1750s, till he died in 1796 or 17. But he was the resident pastor here. He wrote to Henry Melchior in Philadelphia and says, "You sent me here, help me out." And we have some of his books that Henry sent down with Simon's name in them. Again, thank Nick Bracey for some of this. And gave him sermons, devotional material, etc. So Simon was here the longest, pastor. The Synod legislature finally licensed Simon to perform marriages. He couldn't do anything else in the church, baptize, confirm. He could bury, but he wasn't even allowed to marry first. Finally, the legislature allowed him to marry, gave him a license, and he married over 350 couples in and around Strasbourg. Okay, Simon Haar. That is a title page in one of the books that Henry sent down. And there's Simon Harris. That was 1786, David man. And we have that book. It's in my front room next to my piano. I'm trying to protect it. Along with several other books that make us give. Back to Henry Melchior. He had 3 sons of renown. The one that we're most used to seeing name-wise is Peter Woodstock, the famous robe. I see some heads going. If you don't know the story of the Ecclesiastes, there's a time for war and a time for peace. Now's the time for war, and he threw off his robe, which is over here on the side. He says, now's the time for war, and he recruits the 8th Regiment, the German regiment, off to the Revolutionary War. A little side about Peter, since we have a school named after him and everything else, his statue in front of the courthouse in Woodstock. And his bust is there too, but we didn't like that, did we, Gloria? No. Okay. Peter, a quick story about him. He, oldest son of Henry Melchior. When Henry got here, he married Conrad Weiser's daughter. Conrad Weiser was the Indian agent for all of the Indians in western Pennsylvania down through Maryland and Virginia. He liked his father-in-law, Peter, and he was more of the outdoors man, the hunter, the fisherman, the camper, he didn't really want to be a minister, okay? His 2 brothers probably the same way, Frederick and what was the other name? Help me, Gloria. Anyway, there were three brothers, Peter being the oldest. But anyway, Henry sends, after that trip that took 3.5 months, he sends his 3 sons back to Holland to be educated. So 3 months back in a ship, London, Rotterdam, up the Rhine. Peter was the oldest, and he wanted to hunt and fish. He didn't want to go to school, and he got over there. And they put him in some kind of menial thing, not to educate him. The 2 younger brothers were younger, and they were schooled there. Peter ran away and joined the British Navy, trying to get back to North America, which he did. They signed him up. He fought in the British Navy, and lo and behold, he ends up in America again. Gets off the boat, made his dad mad. Henry said, "You're going to be a Lutheran pastor. I'm sending you down to the Lutheran Church in Center City, Philadelphia, St. Michael's, which was growing, and you're going to intern there and learn something about the ministry." So that's how Peter gets his kind of theological education, and he is eventually ordained a Swedish bishop, along with 2 other Lutheran theologians, finally ordained him, and Christian Straight, who's coming up in the discussions, and one other. I lost my place there. But anyway, he's ordained. But then Henry Melchior wants to send him to Woodstock and these communities down here. And there are no Church of England pastors either. So he sends them back to England. 3 months again in a boat back. He only has to go to London this time and go into school over there, and finally receives ordination in the Church of England, Episcopal Church. Back to Philadelphia, his dad, Henry Melchior, sends him to Woodstock finally. Okay? So he gets to Woodstock. Why does he have 2 ordinations? The Bedford parish of the Episcopal Church, the Church of England, had no priests either. So now they had Peter Muhlenberg here, who has both ordinations. If you go down Woodstock, go down to one street, church, whichever, you'll see Emmanuel Lutheran on the one side, where he was. It's spelled kind of funny with one, you know. If you go down, their backyards connect to the other Emmanuel Episcopal Church. He had both of them. That's the Beckford Parish part of it. Okay. I'm not sure whether he was in the Beckford Parish pulpit when he threw off the robe, but I know he was at the Emmanuel Lutheran one and recruited the German regiment. Okay. After he did that act, he was never in the pulpit again. Okay. Eventually he goes and is made a colonel in the Revolutionary Army, serves under General George Washington, who eventually makes him a general at Valley Forge. And when he finishes with the Revolutionary War, he becomes a congressman in Pennsylvania. Okay. I guess he hunted and fished the rest of the time. I don't.
How long was he a pastor serving?
I think he was here 7 years. Yeah, I believe.
How
in
long it
Woodstock.
was? He was
Yeah. And it wasn't just there. It was, he preached here, preached west, in the Lutheran churches on the back road, and I think clear down to Newmarket. Christian Straight. He also was with Henry Melchior in Philadelphia, Bedmeister, New Jersey. So he was born in this country. All of the rest of the ones so far were not. Christian Straight was born in Bedmeister, New Jersey, crossed the Delaware River from Philadelphia. He came across the river at Henry Melchior's request and was educated there, very educated man. German, English, Latin scholar, and Christian Straight then is also sent to the German Lutherans in the Valley, primarily in Winchester, but served all of the Lutherans in this whole part of Virginia. We included in the book his journal or diary that will show you all the places that he preached each Sunday. Horseback now, I think it was horseback, maybe carriage, I'm not sure whether he had carriage or not. But it'll say in there, you know, Sunday morning in Steins, which is Clark County, in the evening at Newtown, which is Stevens City. And he's preaching German at Stovertown, that's here, and then in the evening at Pine, which is St. Mary's Pine west of Woodstock. Okay. His whole diary goes through that. Okay. He also is called upon by Simon Harr to then confirm and baptize. Simon Harr educates them in the school here, but he can't confirm them or baptize them. So when Christian gets here, he has a whole list of baptism he has to perform. Or I examined the confirmation class from Simon Harr and then confirmed them at the Sunday, and there were 40 of them, or whatever it was. Christian Straight's windows outside the door where you come into church. Okay. It was behind the altar before we turned the church around and added the narthex. He is the first really resident, ordained Lutheran pastor in the area. What did it? There's the window. At nighttime, it's illuminated. How am I doing? I don't have the time.
I think they're all intrigued. They're doing great.
We're all right. Okay. This is one of the stained glass windows. It's the only one that is a different design than all the rest of the windows that are in the church. And I don't know why. Okay. John Francis Campbell was pastor here 2 different times. He started off in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, as a lawyer. Okay. And came down and was the pastor here the first time in 1844. He's noted primarily because a lot of things happened in the 2 periods he was here. Okay, certainly the one 1871 to 76 was the restoring of the church following the Civil War, the adding of the steeple, okay, and the buttresses around the church, etc. The first one is a shorter one, and you can't see it, but if you look straight out the window there, his grave and all family is right outside the window. Okay. He's one of at least 3 pastors that are out there. This is a son, and you'll note in the book that there's several connections between here and Hebron, where I served first. I think there's a good connection between our 2 churches, not only because I served there, but Wright Gatewood, John Campbell's son, was his first call was over at Hebron. This is Cedardale. It was destroyed when they made the Route 55 interchange.
Right before you get to the Moose.
Right before you get to the Moose.
It's the
Okay.
ground.
That also was where the glebe was, the 200 acres. And we think the house over here, that was a parsonage one time, or glebe house. Whoops. Well,
There you go.
there we go. You might recognize this house on Holiday Street. Probably could be considered the first parsonage here. This is the house that Levi Keller, another connection over to Hebron, he was the Levi married the mayor's daughter. We got a lot of mayors too, but Isaac Hearn, who's buried out here, and Levi Keller married her, and this was his first call from Gettysburg Seminary. This is where they lived. I'm not sure whether Isaac Hearn owned this and kind of said, here, daughter, or no. It also was called, Annabelle Wingfield told me, the Seitzer House, or the Captain's Fencer House. Or, there you go.
What she said.
That's where it is. It also then became the house where Charles Keller, Pastor Charles Keller, Levi Keller's son, kind of had a retirement home. No, he wasn't retired. He was still serving in the Pittsburgh area when he died. If you go in Riverview Cemetery and see the above the ground grave, that's the Reverend Charles Keller. This is where he came and stayed when he was in Strasbourg. And I think he married
Zay.
Tenny Zay. Tenny Zay. Right. Okay. All know where that is? If you pass it the next time you can look at it. It is a log structure. Whoops. One of the things this project has done is it took us so long because we got kind of sidetracked on a lot of things. One was Levi Keller. Grave was broken off. In fact, we had to research exactly when he was buried, where he was buried, et cetera, et cetera. He's buried next to his father-in-law, Isaac Hearn. But we also then had to put a proper burial marker for Levi Keller, which was a project that we got done back in a few years ago. Another interesting side about the history, bringing things to life for you, when I look right beside this is his wife, Mary Catherine Hearn Keller. Her stone was all there and had 5 intersecting circles. And I had seen that on graves in my Western Pennsylvania history and knew some of the connections, but in researching that, they're symbols for the women's organization of the IOOF, the International Order of Oddfellows. And I didn't know that Oddfellows were meeting in Strasbourg. They aren't anymore, but they used to be. Above Grill Grocery. Okay. And they're going to tear down Grill Grocery, so we had to also say we need that marble marker at the top that has the IOOF for the museum. So we got that. I haven't seen it down at the museum, but that's... Another of the early pastors is Pastor Russ Meiler. Russ Meisel's grave is out at Lebanon Church Cemetery. He was a rather interesting fellow, as all of these pastors were. In fact, I'm rather vanilla when it comes to these pastors. He was also sickly. He worked himself to death, I think. He served not only here, but he served Lebanon Church, he served Trinity Stephen City, he served St. Stephen's, up and down Woodstock. He just was in all of the churches. St. James Zepp. And in his later years, he became kind of a lord of the Lutheran churches in the area. I don't know whether it's the next slide or not. Probably not. One of the things that the congregations would do, they had wagons that they would fill with foodstuffs, needs, and he was a regular recipient of the St. Paul 4-horse team. The 4-horse team pops up, with a band on it. For a while we had a band, the St. Paul band, or the St. Paul churches turned into the picnic at Fisher's Hill. They took this 4-horse team wherever, before cars. And so he finally found his, after hunting for it for a while, finally found his grave out at Lebanon Church Cemetery. The Smith era. What do I say about Smiths? L.L. Smith is the longest serving pastor of St. Paul. Now he also, again, had many other churches that he was serving, but originally from Maryland, probably over around when you cross the bridge now, going to Frederick, Maryland, over in that area. But his first call was down Stanton Way. And didn't serve there very long till he came here. He probably more things happened here at St. Paul under his tenure than any of the others. LL, and I don't know whether it's the next picture or not. A quick side, this was a bugle that he found while wandering on the Antietam battlefield, Civil War. Okay? And we got that picture from a daughter. Not a daughter. Granddaughter. Granddaughter. Okay. There's the 4-horse team. Okay? And I'm not sure whether they're going to the picnic at Fisher's Hill. It doesn't look like there's a band on there. But that's the way they went around doing stuff. Okay? This is L.L. Smith here. And you might know some of the others on there. I don't know. This is one of the earliest pictures that I could find of St. Paul. Under LL's pastorate here of 28 years, they celebrated a huge celebration here in 1903, which was the 134th anniversary of the congregation, but was the 20th anniversary of Pastor Smith's ordination. He had just turned down a call to a large Lutheran church in Des Moines, Iowa, and saying he was going to spend the rest of his time here in Strasbourg. The picture itself was in an article by William Thomas Luther Dosh. Dosh House. Okay. Probably, I think, the most accomplished pastor associated with this church, son of this congregation. He became a professor at Roanoke College. The seminary, Southern Seminary, was with the college. He became president of the seminary. Very short time because he was too strict. The students rebelled against him. They liked to party. He wanted them to study, so they got rid of the professor and president. But Dosh himself was very learned. He became editor of a weekly, get this now, weekly newspaper. As he moves around the country pastoring St. John's Lutheran Church in Charleston, South Carolina, St. John's Lutheran Church in Salisbury, North Carolina. He gathers articles, the whereabouts of Lutherans in the whole United States, clear to the Middle West. Professor, very accomplished, William Thomas Luther Dosh. It's telling me something.
Yeah.
Oops, did I go too? Here's just a series of pictures of the church. Is one of the things that Gloria and I really enjoyed was looking at old pictures of the church, just like family pictures that never have names on them or dates. You all are like us. They don't tell you anything either. This is an old picture of the church. You see how high Washington Street is there? Runs almost level with the first set of steps. They had to dig it down about 3 feet to pave Washington Street. But as you look at pictures of the church, and there isn't anything on the back to tell when this was taken, you kind of get a history of what was going on. How many windows are in the church here that aren't in the next picture? And where they are, where the graves are and aren't. Okay? The next picture. Whoops.
It's,
Yeah. Whoop.
it has a mind of its own.
There. One of my favorites, again, no identification on this picture, which is in the chapel. I think it's in the late 1800s, but you'll note that the Smith windows, L.L. Smith's windows, are here, and there's no stained glass window in them yet. So he must still be alive. Okay, so that would be 1909. Okay? It's also the first section. The second section of the church is not there. If you get real close, you can look at kind of flowerets on the slate going up the steeple and out the roof line. It's not excavated underneath the church, so that you know it's before the excavation in 1922. Several of the prominent stones are not here, and there's other stones out there that aren't there anymore. The only thing that's still there is the cedar tree. It's still out there. I thought they were going to cut that down a couple years ago. No, goodness. Also, hitching posts for the horses all along the street. Interesting to look at the pictures. I think it's telling you something. Well, another shot of the church. This is since 1986, because the addition in Harbex is there. That is our official bicentennial picture. Was painted by Daniel Berner, who teaches at Massanet Military Academy, or did. This was the last sketch that he had before we approved it for commissioning the picture for the bicentennial. He did a chalk on old brown paper bags, and he was going to fold them up and tear them and throw them away. I said, no, let me roll them off and I'll take them home. That's where this is. That's what the final picture, which is out in the north, looks like. One of the things that we did for the bicentennial, or no, excuse me, the renovation was to remove the old altar. This is the altar reredos. The altar table was this part, which was a table, came out, the communion sat on, and the Virginia church furniture people in Pulaski built our new pews, new furniture, and took the altar, the pulpit, and something else I forgot, and redid them for the new configuration of the church in 1986. This is the reredos, and you'll see that as an altarpiece in the next picture here. There he is with the table now in front of him. I should back up. I have a section on organs. Organs are interesting. When we first came in 1769, there was a log church out here. That was their first house of worship. And it says they had an old cumbersome pipe organ that they wagoned down from Baltimore. I don't know what happened to that. Usually when they take an organ apart, they give all the pipes to the kids in town and they run up and down. Maybe that's what happened to that. Anyway, this is the Moeller organ, and it's not a tracker action, it's a pneumatic organ, meaning you can move. This is the console over here. When I got here, the console was over here on this side, so you can move it around. That's the Moeller organ. The one before that was a Hook and Hastings that Pastor Dosh said was put in at L.L. Smith's big anniversary in 1903. Okay. So we go from Hook and Hastings to Moeller to Andover. In 1987 it was put in. That is Joey Klein. Some of you might know Joey took that on a choir night. That's the bell that we ring for funerals and every Sunday morning to call to worship. That's the cemetery. The cemetery itself, there's the other pastor out here is Cobb. You can't read his stone at all when it's off on a kind of an angle. I guess that's another project. But when we added the narthex in '86, we only had to move one grave of a little girl, and had her reinterred a little farther out this way, which was an interesting experience. Rodney Racy was kind of our local kind of superintendent to oversee the work, and he came running to my office and said, "We think we found a grave during the excavation." And so I said, "We need to reinter her." And the soil here, there's no, I'm having it is clay, you know, but what, you put the casket in a vault. No bolts here, no, okay. They're simply put in the casket in this clay soil that's very moist. Her grave was only about that thick. Okay. And the only reason we knew that it was a grave was it was a black thread through the red clay, through the hard pan clay. And as we kind of examined it, she was laid on or in what looked like a pillowcase with intricate embroidery. And it was spotless. It had not deteriorated a bit.
That's amazing.
And that's what we laid back in. And her grave is right in here now. Cain is in the possession of Nick Racy. You'll note that in the story about the tall clock. That is the Danner clock, a rather famous clock builder from the valley. While I served here, Ruth came to me and said her husband's buried out here. She wanted to be buried there too. And that was at the time the council was talking about doing something with the cemetery. And I said, "I'm not sure we can bury anybody else out in the cemetery." And she said, "I would like to be buried next to my husband, and I will give you a family clock and endow it with a maintenance thing." So I went to the council and I said, "Sure." Sure, why not? At the time, she was a member of St. Luke's in Silver Spring, Maryland, who I knew the pastor, and he wanted the clock too, the narthex at St. Luke. So we got together and talked it through. The clock's out in the narthex if you want to look at it. But she was the last burial in the cemetery. And immediately then the council declared the cemetery inactive, so we can't bury anybody else out there. Beautiful clock. Bill Carper and I went down there and wrestled it out of the hands of Pastor Ridley and brought it back to the valley where it was made. Another story. Where am I about it?
Doing okay, close. You're about another 5, 7, so, yep. You're all
This
right.
is a Proctor. Proctor is a German pen and ink. It's more than pen and ink. It's colored with various inks, and is a baptismal. This is a confirmation certificate signed by Christian Strait that I've already told you about. And again, an interesting story there, and I won't go into that whole thing. What we have is not the original, and we haven't found where the original is. Okay? I have a picture here. We'll give you a hint. Okay? That's the Good Shepherd window right out here.
Go ahead.
That's the window in the front of the church, what we call the Sunday school, or the Beehive Bible and Lamp window. That's the back cover of Rich Cooley. Took that a number of years ago. Was at the right place at the right time. He told me the other day.
It's rich. You did so well.
Whether I left any time for questions.
Yeah, you did, Pastor Hall. You did a great job. Yeah. Do we have time for a couple questions? Anyone have some questions of Pastor Hall and Gloria?
The Levi Keller grave, which cemetery is that?
It's right out there. Yep, right out there on the corner. Interesting story, Dennis, about him. He died when he was serving in St. Paul outside of Hagerstown, Williamsport. And he fell out of an apple tree, which caused his death. And he was trained, railroaded back here and buried there.
Wow.
Again, I didn't tell you the story about this congregation during the Civil War, but we were so close to the railroad, which is right outside the window here, as well as Banks Fork, which is at the top of the hill. This church was almost totally destroyed. It was a brick church, which you still see, but it was used as a hospital first, and they cut up all the wood in it to make caskets. And when all the wood was gone, then they stored arsenal in there. And then when they couldn't do that anymore, everything was gone. They just used it as a stable. They drove cattle and pigs and everything.
The Yankees did that, right?
The Yankees. Yes, they
Is all that in the book?
did. That's in the book.
Yeah, he didn't want to share all the stories. That's the reason he went about the book.
Stories that-
Got time for a couple
I
more.
talked to Gloria about the stories that we couldn't put in.
Over sideways.
Out right out here, yeah.
That's the same
All we
one.
did is straighten, there wasn't anything there, but it's in the ground.
Jane. Good question.
That raises a question that besides Christian Straight's diary in the back, there is an appendix with all of the graves listed, along with the Civil War soldiers first. Okay, so that's an appendix in the book.
Somewhere in your early talk, you mentioned a town in Germany, I believe, something like St. Mary's of the Strand.
That's in London. Yeah, that was a Lutheran gathering point to house them, get them jobs enough to get enough coinage to get a ship's captain to get over here.
Our old theater here was the Strand Theater. Is there any connection?
No.
I don't think so. I don't think, they're,
That's an odd thing.
yeah, St. Mary's at the Strand, yeah.
Strand was a popular theater name in a lot of theaters in the
I
country.
was gonna say
Yeah.
there are a lot of Strand.
Yeah, the connection.
Strand is also a street in
Right.
London, the definition
Yeah,
of
it's for
street.
theater. One more question. One more question?
Any more?
Good? All right, so again, what we have, first of all, another round of applause.